What's up, folks? I don't ever go live, but I have in front of me the Agricultural Bill of Rights. I've read pages 1 through 6, put it on TikTok, and ultimately I am about to continue off on page 7. A lot has changed, a lot has developed, and ultimately in 2022, the Agricultural Bill of Rights was created to step up for farmers that were being actively discriminated against and actively targeted. So I said I would do it on my page, and ultimately this is me fulfilling that promise. And I decided to do it live because, making multiple shorts doesn't make sense. So without further ado, I'm going to continue reading. And if you have any questions, like I said, just put it in the thing and I'll continue from here. Okay, on page 7, let's see. On page 7 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, minimum wage workers 8-6-101.5. Minimum wage workers for agricultural workers, rest periods, overwork protections, and definitions. Section 1, on or after January 1st, 2022, except as provided in subsection 1B of the section, the minimum wage requirements of section 15 of Article XVII of the state constitution and any minimum wage laws enacted in pursuant to Article 6 apply to the agricultural employers employing agricultural workers. Section B, the Colorado minimum wage that an agricultural employer must pay to an agricultural worker who is particularly engaged in the range production of livestock as described in 21 CFR 780.323 to 29 CFR 780.329 as an open range. And so ultimately what that's saying is it's not just farmers, it's all agricultural workers. And then beginning on January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022, $515 per week. And like I was saying in my last video, what that means is there was a Jim Crow law that stopped employers from having to pay their employees that were migrant workers. And ultimately, because of this, migrant workers were not allowed to request money. They weren't allowed to step up and be like, hey, they weren't even allowed to request a wage increase. So continuing, now they can't do that. They have to pay a minimum of $550 a week. Beginning January 1st, the minimum age requirement in the United States prior to the calendar year adjusted annually as measured by the United States Department of Labor, Bureau and Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index for Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, or predecessor or successor index. The director may set a higher minimum wage in Aurora, Denver, and Lakewood than is required by the subsection 1B title II, consistent to the director's authority and or duties, including under Article 6. What that's saying is those three communities are allowed to step up and say, we're paying more than the state mandated minimum wage. And so continuing, an agricultural worker is entitled to an uninterrupted and duty-free meal period of at least 30-minute duration with an agricultural worker's shift if it exceeds 5 consecutive hours. The meal periods, to the extent practicable, must be at least 1 hour after the start and 1 hour before the end of the shift. An agricultural worker must be relieved of all duties and permitted to pursue personal activity for a period to qualify as non-work related. Uncompensated time. If the nature of the business activities or other circumstances make the uninterrupted meal period impractical, the agricultural employee must be permitted to consume an on-duty meal while performing their duties. An agricultural employee must be permitted to fully consume a meal of choice while working to be fully compensated for the on-duty meal period without any loss of time or compensation. What that's saying is, I know a lot of people like to work through their job, and a lot of employers like, we don't have time for lunch. You are obligated to have your lunch. You are obligated. So like I said, I got this going on TikTok as well. So now we're going into page 8 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, Colorado SB21-087, page 8. An agricultural worker is entitled to an uninterrupted and duty-free rest period of at least 10 minutes within each 4 hours of work. The subsection 2 under Title C does not apply to a truck driver whose sole and principal duty is to haul livestock, or to a combine or harvested operator while harvesting. What that means is if you are a combine operator, if you are a truck operator for livestock during a harvest, you are not obligated to that break time. I think that needs to be changed. Section 3, as used in this section, agricultural worker has the meaning set forth Section 8-13.5 201 Title 3 in a Colorado Revised Statutes adds 8-6-120 as follows. This was an addition. Overtime wages for agricultural and workers legislative declaration, and they put this in bold. So this is the declaration by the state of Colorado about overtime. The director shall promulgate rules providing meaningful overtime and maximum hour protections agricultural employees to be proposed no later than October 31st, 2021. And adopted in January 31st, 2022. In promulgating such rules, the director shall consider inequality and racist origins of the exclusions of agricultural employees from overtime and maximum hours of protections available to their other employees. The fundamental right for all employees to overtime and maximum hour standard that protects the health and welfare of employees and the unique difficulties that agricultural employees have obtaining workforce conditions equal to those provided by other employers. What that's saying is, in 2022, they highlighted racial Jim Crow laws, very racist Jim Crow laws. And in 2022, it stated that the Jim Crow laws that Jared Polis abolished stopped employees from being able to step up and say, enough is enough, I want a raise. It stopped employees from being able to act in bargaining committees and step up and say, I want a raise. And so what this is this is declaring the racial, or let's get to the actual word. This proclamation promulgating the rules, the director shall consider the inequality and racist origins of excluding agricultural employees from overtime and maximum hour protections. Right there in the fine line. Racist origins. Inequality origins. Right there. So Section 5, the Colorado Revised Statutes, adds Parts 2 to the Article 13.5 of Title 8 as follows. Labor conditions for agricultural and workers. 8-13.5-201 definitions used in this Part 2 unless context otherwise requires. What this is saying is agricultural employer has the same meaning set forth in Sections 8-3-104 Title 1. So now we are on page 9 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. Page 9 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. Section 2, agricultural employment. Agricultural employment means the employment in any service or activities included in Section 203, Title F of the Federal Fair Labor and Standard Act of 1938. 21 U.S.C. Section 201, entitled Section SEQ, as amended, or a Section 3121G of the Federal Internal Revenue Code of 1986 amended. Section 3, agricultural worker or workers means a worker engaged in any service of activity included in Section 203. In Section 203, Fair Labor Standards of 1938. 29 United States Constitution, Section 201, amended Section 3121G of the Federal Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as amended. What this is saying is they're amending our Constitution and applying them to the state Constitution. So now, Title 4, an agricultural workers representative. An agricultural workers representative. That was what I was. I was a representative for my fellow colleagues. Means a person or entity designed by an agricultural employee in a confidential sealed filing with the court. So we had to petition the state, we had to petition the city, we had to petition to the company that we wanted to organize. And so Section 5, department means the Department of Labor and Employment. Section 6, division means the Division of Labor Standards and Statistics in the department. Section 7, key service provider means the healthcare provider of the community health worker, including promotia, an educational provider, an attorney, a legal advocate, a government official, including a counselor, representative, a member of the clergy, and other services which the agricultural worker may need access to. So I'm coming up at the end of page 9, Agricultural Bill of Rights. Section 8, occasional or intermittent worker means 20% or less of the agricultural worker's weekly work time. So I'm on live. So basically, I'm about to end this off. Page 9, Agricultural Bill of Rights. Peace.
Page 7 of the Agricultural
All right,
Bill of
friends.
Rights, minimum wage workers. Minimum wage workers 8-6-101.5. Minimum
Posting
wage
this on
workers for
TikTok as well.
agricultural Workers rest periods, overwork protections, and definitions. Section 1, on or after January 1st, 2022, except as provided in subsection 1B of the section. The minimum wage requirements of section 15 of Article XEII of the state constitution and the minimum wage law.
In case you were wondering, my TikTok is called Blowing the Whistle 420. So Blowing the Whistle 420. So now let's continue while this is getting posted. All right. What's up, TikTok? So we are on page 9. I'm about halfway down the page. I did click live on my YouTube. I don't think anything's going to post right. I just wanted to post a full video. So that's why I'm doing this on live, just so you know. So basically, I'm on section 6, Agricultural Bill of Rights, on page 9. So section 6 on page 9. Bring this closer to make sure you guys can hear me. So section 6 on page 9. Let's begin. So section 6, division means the Division of Labor Standards and Statistics within the departments. Section 7, key service provider. So a key service provider means a healthcare provider, a community health worker, including a promotia or an educational provider, an attorney, a legal advocate, a government official, including a counselor, representative, a member of the clergy, and any other service provider to which an agricultural worker may need access. Occasional or intermittent means 20% or less of an agricultural's workly week time. Section 9, short-handled hoe, meaning, and actually this was a big deal, short-handled hoes, the amount of farm workers that hurt their backs to just hose is actually quite astonishing, believe it or not. So they had to make a rule about it. And so Section 9, short-handled hoe, means a handheld tool with a flat blade affixed perpendicularly to a handle that is less than 18 inches long. Short-handled hoes include long-term handled hoes that have been modified to be used as a short handle. What this means, if I am using a handled hoe, basically I have protections that says if I get hurt or something happens or I'm like, yo, I need to stretch, there's section 9 of page 9 on the Senate bill. Look it up. Okay, so now this is what I fall under, section 10, whistleblowers. So I am a whistleblower in the state of Colorado, and I am very proud of it because I care about my colleagues. I care about my industry. I care about the consumers in our industry. Maybe that's my downfall. I don't know, but I care. So this is me saying hello to caring. So section 10, protection of whistleblowers, meaning whistleblower means an agricultural worker with the knowledge of an alleged violation of this part 2 or of the agricultural worker's representative. Okay. Section 10, a whistleblower meaning an agricultural worker with the knowledge of an alleged violation of this part, meaning part Agricultural Bill of Rights. I am alleging that Live Well Enlightened, PharmaCan, and Very Life were knowingly in their union busting tactics in 2022, December to be specific, just prior to the Agricultural Bill of Rights being launched on January 1st, 2023. And I was fired on January 6th, 2023, 5 days after this was enacted. So, yes, I do allege, and I will continue to allege, because knowing your rights is very important. And as a whistleblower in the state of Colorado, we are protected. So other farmers, other dispensary workers, I'm calling on y'all. It's time to stand up. So now continuing, we're officially on page 10. Page 10 is very wordy, as you can see. Page 10 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, agricultural worker representatives. Agricultural Bill of Rights workers, agricultural workers' right to access key services. Section 8-13.5202. An employee or an employer, no, go back up. I skipped ahead on a paragraph. Agricultural workers' right to access the key services providers and rules. Title 1, Section A, an employer shall not interfere with an agricultural worker's reasonable access to visitors at the agricultural worker's employer-provided housing during any time when the agricultural is present at such housing. What this is saying is there's several workers out there, and it got abolished, that were living on the farms, and they couldn't see their children, they couldn't see their spouses, and ultimately were treated like slaves. And so this is another title addressing that issue, meaning that if you are an agricultural worker and you work on that farm, you have every right for your children to come and visit you. You have every right for your spouses to come visit you. Now, an employer shall not interfere with an agricultural worker's reasonable access to key service providers at any location during any time to which the agricultural worker is not performing compensatable work, or during a work period or unrest period or meal breaks, with respect to the health care providers during any time, whether or not agricultural worker is working. What this is meaning is you are allowed, if you need to speak to a health provider, to stop what you are doing and push forward. So now Section C. To ensure that agricultural workers have a meaningful access to services, the director of the division shall promulgate rules regarding additional times to which an employer may not interfere with an agricultural worker's reasonable access to key service providers, including periods during which the agricultural worker is performing compensatable work, especially during periods which the agricultural worker is required to work in excessive of 40 hours per week and may have difficulty accessing such services outside of work hours. These rules must be proposed before October 21st and adopted by January 31st, 2022. What this is saying is if you are at work and you are sick, you are ill, you are not feeling well, you have something going on, you are obligated by law now to be able to stop what you are doing and address this issue. If I am not feeling well, I have a right to stop what I'm doing, focus on my well-being, and go home. Or contact a legitimate provider to be like, hey, I need this type of service, or I need to call a doctor, I need to go to a hospital, that type of stuff. So that's Section C on page 10, Senate Bill. Now, Section D, an agricultural employer may require visitors accessing a work site to follow protocols designed and manage biohazards and other risk contamination, of course, to promote food safety and to reduce the risk of injuries to the livestock or farms and ranches except in open range. If same protocols are generally applied to any other third parties, may occasionally have to enter the work site. That's just saying if you have a company, yes, you're allowed to have company at that work site, but they do need to adhere to the law, PPEs and whatnot. So last section, Section E on page 10, an agricultural employer that provides housing and transportation for agricultural workers shall at least 1 day per week provide transportation to an agricultural worker's location where the agricultural worker can access basic necessities, conduct financial transactions, and meet with key service providers, except that transportation must be provided not less than 1 day every 3 weeks for range workers who are actively engaged in production of livestock in open range. This subsection 1E does not limit or restrict an agricultural worker's ability to travel using the agricultural worker's own means of transportation. Nothing in this subsection requires an employer to violate a state or federal law or regulation. What that is saying is you have the right, if you work, and this is another Jim Crow era law that got abolished, if you work on a farm specific to these potato farmers out east and out west, like down south in Colorado, potato farmers and livestock workers, if you are a migrant worker or a full-time, part-time employee that works on these farms, you have the right and the right to demand actual transportation from that farm to a city or a spot that you can go bank, transact, and look at medical professions. And you have the right to say, I need to go do it on Tuesday morning, and you need to provide me the transportation. Don't be scared. It's in writing. So that is page 10 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. We have 22 pages to read. So as you can see, they have already pointed out the racial discrimination. They have already pointed out the racial origins of of why we needed an Agricultural Bill of Rights. They've already pointed out that the Agricultural Bill of Rights needs reformed and that there is wording that's going to be added and taken from. And honestly, like I said, this is an original copy. I'll show you the back page before. Look at this. This is the original signed copy. Signed right there. Jared Polis right there at the bottom, signed. To prevent misinformation, I went to the courthouse and I requested this information, and then I happened to be in Denver, and then they turned around and had each of these representatives sign this for me. So continuing. This is about to be in. So TikTok, page 10, going into page 11. And like I said, I'm doing this on YouTube as well, so I can have a full fluent video of this that I can pull from later. And ultimately, like I said, I am now on page 12, or let me make sure I'm saying this right. Page 11 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, moving into the SB21. And again, I am doing this because I want to educate my fellow farmers. I want to educate these workers and make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else.
So we are on page 9, about halfway down the page. I think I'm live on my YouTube. I just wanted to post a full video. So basically, I'm on section 6 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights on page 9. So section 6 on page 9. Bring this closer to make sure you guys can hear me. Section 6 on page 9. So, Section 6, Division of Labor Standards and Statistics within the Department.
Okay. What's up, TikTok? So I'm on live on YouTube on my channel, Mr. Cakes931. I'm doing a full stream so that I can pull from it later and just evaluate course action here. And so with that, I am up to my whistleblower protections in the state of Colorado. I was the leader of the of the Coalition of Live Well employees here in Denver from 2021 through 2023. And ultimately, our biggest drive was we wanted contracts of employment. We wanted workers' rights. We wanted a bargaining committee, and we had to discuss the discrimination happening within our workforce. So without further ado, page 11, section F. If an agricultural worker has access to the worker's own vehicle and is permitted to park the vehicle on the employee's property, The employer is not required to provide transportation set forth in subsection 1E. On my last video, I just read subsection 1E, which means if you are a worker that lives and works full-time on those farms, which there's a lot of them, 2 out of 4 workers live on the farms they work, the employer is required to provide you transportation once or twice within a 3-week period or by request during a working business hour. And they are not allowed to retaliate against. That's subsection 1, title E. So now we are on section 2 of page 11. No person other than an agricultural worker may prohibit, bar, or interfere with, or attempt to prohibit, bar, or interfere with the access or egress from the residence or residence of any agricultural worker by any person, either by the erection of maintenance or physical barrier, a physical force or violence, or threat of physical force or violence, by any other order, notice given in any manner. You are not a slave. That's pretty much what that is. Even if you're a migrant worker, you are not a slave. Know your rights. If you're from Mexico, listen, guys, I will sit here and translate all of this into Spanish and have one of my Spanish friends read it with me if I have to. If you are from Asia, there was a lot of wording that got abolished in the Colorado statutes that was definitely against you guys. And if you are a Native American, a tribal worker, so much wording against you as well has been abolished. So page 11, know your rights, guys. So we are on section 3. An agricultural employer shall not post notices of an agricultural worker's rights under this part 2 in a conspicuous location of the agricultural worker's premises, including an agricultural worker's employer-related housing, meaning they can't go sit there posting shit inside of your house. They can't go sitting there posting shit on your door. They can't go threatening you. In all places where, in all places where notices to employees, including agricultural workers, are customarily posted. That's where this is supposed to be posted. If it's not, they are not in compliance under state law. If you do not have SB21-087 posted on your farm, be it integrated, indoor, outdoor, does not matter, greenhouse, you are violating the law. Section C or Section B of page 11. So Section C, electronically, including by email or an interrupt or internet site, if an employer customarily communicates with the agricultural by that means. So if you are normally communicating via messages or online, the employer is required to show you this online as well. So if like you're a single remote employee that is off on a farm taking care of livestock by yourself, they're required to provide you this information. And so this is a big one that was added. 8-13.5-203, extreme overwork protections, heat stress training, short-handled hoe prohibition, and rules. This is important. I have actually experienced heat exhaustion, and it is not good. You throw up a bunch. It's disgusting. And you know what my employer made me do? Get back to fucking work. So 8-13.5-203, extreme overwork protections. The director of the division shall promulgate rules that require agricultural employers to protect agricultural workers from heat-related stress, illnesses, and injuries that outside temperatures reach 80 degrees or higher. What that means, if it's 80 degrees or higher, your employer is required to provide you heat stress related areas where you can just calm down, drink water, breathe. So 80 degrees or higher with discretion to an adjustment requirements based on the environmental factors, exposure time, acclimations, and metabolic demands of the job as set forth by the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, Centers for Disease Control, Prevention of National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health in 2016, revised publication, criteria for a recommended standard occupational exposure to heat in hot environments. These rules must be proposed on October 2021 and adopted on or before January 2022. So Section 2, and again, we're in the Agricultural Bill of Rights, page 11, doing this live so that I can pull from it later. But the performance of weeding and thinning by hand, defoliating, using a short-handled tool other than the short-handled hoe in a stooped, kneeling, or squatting position is strongly disfavored. unless there is no suitable long-handed tool or other alternative means of performing that work that is suitable or appropriate by both the production of the agricultural or horticultural commodity and the scale of the operation. Nothing in this subsection 2 is construed to allow the use of short-handled hose. What that means is if you are in the position like farmers on GP2, they have to sit in this little crunch position leaning over the farm, and they have to defoliate all of these families for hours at a time. And what happens is they'll provide a third party to come and do it, and that third party has to do it for hours at a time. And I'm telling you, that ruins your back. Ruins your back. Ruins. That means right here, you are allowed to be able to stop, stretch, breathe, be like, whew, okay. So now continuing, beginning January 1st, 2022, this subsection does not prohibit occasional or intermittent hand weeding and hand thinning in a stoop, kneeling, or squatting position that is incidental or non-hand weeding operations. What this means is they're not requiring the employer to say you can't do this. What they are saying, however, is if you are doing this, take a moment, take a breath, and employers, you need to stop pushing these guys to a point where they feel like their back is breaking. I mean, listen, I'm a third generation farmer, okay? I love dirt. I will sit here and eat, breathe, and live dirt all day long. So what I'm saying is hand thinning of high density plants spaced less than 2 inches apart when planted. So weed plants that are paked up on top of a table, guess what? They're saying is if you have to defoliate those all day, you need a moment of rest. You need to be able to stop. You need to be able to be like, hey, I'm cramped. My back is stiff. I've been standing in this weird opaque, like you have to stand on your tippy toes on these tables and lean into these canopies and hope not to fall forward. And it just ruins your back, man. It ruins your back. And it's just saying like, yo, it's time to address that. And now 3, hand weeding or thinning of any agricultural or horticultural commodity growth in fields or greenhouses for which the employer maintains current certifications from the Colorado Department of Agriculture or an authorized certifying body that means the standards of the United States Department of Agriculture's National Organics Program. What that means is if you have any form of agricultural commodity on your field, page 11 and 12 applies to you. So now we're on page 13. Hand weeding, thinning, or tending any agricultural horticultural commodities when they are seedlings. Hand weeding, thinning, or tending agricultural horticultural commodities and growing in tubs or planters, containers in which opening does not exceed 15 inches in width. Seeding planters, transplanting, or harvesting by hand or with a hand tool. Hand weeding, thinning, or tending the soil of exposed areas immediately surrounding the agricultural horticultural commodities for growth using polyethylene film or plastic mulch. This exemption does not permit hand weeding of the spaces between rows or plants grown using non-polyethylene film or plastic mulch. What this is saying is just, hey, if you are a large-scale farmer and you are weeding in between these, you have the right to say, I need to stop. And I will reiterate again, you have the right to be like, I need to stop. I have been leaning over on my knees like strawberry field workers, like any type of garden worker that has the plant flowers, that kind of stuff, cornfields sometimes, potato farmers. Like I said, it's just these are saying page 11 through 13 is saying, hey guys, if you are doing this type of work, these are related to you. So page 13 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, SB21-087. Know your rights. Peace. So I am posting this page, and then we can continue. Probably got a couple more in me, and then I'll probably stop to make sure TikTok doesn't think I'm spamming people, but I want you guys to know your rights. I want you to know your rights.
I am adhering to my whistleblower protections in the state of Colorado. I was the leader of the agricultural or coalition of Goodwill employees here in Denver from 2021 through 2023. And ultimately, our biggest drive was we wanted contracts of employment, we wanted workers' rights, we wanted a bargaining community, and we had to discuss the discrimination. Without further ado, page 11, section F. If an agricultural worker has
access to the worker's own vehicle and is permitted to park the vehicle on the employee's property. The employer is not required to provide transportation set forth in subsection 1. On my last video, I just read subsection 1E, which means
All right, so we are continuing now on page 14. Okay. All right, folks, I'm live on my YouTube page on Mr. Cakes 931. I don't usually go live, but I want a full video. So now I'm on page 14 of 21 pages of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. And I'm going to read this entire thing because I believe that farmers do not know their rights. Migrant workers do not know their rights. Local farmers do not know their rights. And 21-year-olds joining the cannabis industry, you do not know your rights. So this is for you guys. Check out my page if you come across this later video. This is page 14 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights of 21 pages. So alternative means of performing the work that is sustainable and appropriate to both the production or agricultural or horticultural commodity and the scale of operation set forth as. 3. Handheld weeding cannot be performed pursuant to an existing exemption pursuant of this subsection. 3. An agricultural employer provides agricultural workers engaged in hand weeding and hand trimming, hand thinning, an additional 5 minutes rest period, which, insofar as impracticable, must be in the middle of each work period. The authorized rest period must be based on the total hours of work daily at the rate in 15 minutes net rate rest time per 4 hours of work, or a major fraction thereof. The agricultural employer shall not count the authorized rest period as hours worked and not deduct the rest period from the agricultural wages. What that is saying, if you are in GP2, for instance, at Livewell, GP2 all day are exfoliating. This, when they say, oh, we're giving you 15, they're not giving you shit. You are required a 15-minute period. So what this means is when they say stop work, you have 15 minutes of break time, and then you go back to work. That doesn't mean you have 10 minutes of break time and you walk for 5 minutes to back to your working station. No, that means you have 15 full, undisputed, unmessed with, and non-removal of pay for your break. You do not have just 10 minutes in that 10-minute period, and then they say, oh, you got to walk back to 5-minute period. That's bullshit. And if they cut you down to 10 minutes and they're making you walk back in 5 minutes, they are violating the law. And you know what? GP2 workers are standing up and saying, we want to unionize, and look, that right here in the pudding. So Section 4, an agricultural employer shall provide gloves and knee pads as necessary to each agricultural worker engaging in hand weeding, hand thinning, or hand hot capping. There was only one pair of knee pads at Livewell, and that was because an employee forgot them, and they've just stayed there, and everyone regurgitated them over and over. They are required to give every single employee knee pads, every single employee. And so if any provision of this section is application to any person or circumstances held invalid or unconstitutional, such provision or application does not affect other provisions or applications of this section that can be given in effect without the invalid or unconstitutional provision, or application to improvisions of the section are severable, meaning they can alter at any time. They can change this information at any time. Enforcement, penalties, relief rules. So this is 8-13.5-204 Enforcement of Penalties. An aggrieved agricultural worker, a whistleblower, or a key service provider who is unable to access agricultural worker due to a violation of this part may commence an action in district court against an agricultural employer for violation of this part 2, or assert a claim with the division pursuant to the rules adopted by the director of the division against agricultural employer. The director may investigate and order all remedies available in district court and may decline investigations and authorize complaints to file in district court. A decision of the director to decline and investigate must be made within 90 days after a claim is filed as established by rule of the director. The statutes of limitation is told for the purpose of filing a claim in district court from the date that the claim is asserted until 90 days after the director declines that claim. 2. A court may order injunctive relief to enjoin the constituents of the violation of this part. B. Award the plaintiff actual damages or $10,000, whichever is greater. 3. Award the plaintiff attorney fees. B. Any amount recovered by a whistleblower or key service provider pursuant to this section must be distributed to the agricultural workers affected by the violation who can be located in so far of a disbursement of economic feasible. What this is meaning, if me, the whistleblower, stood up today and came to you guys, the consumers in Denver, Colorado, and said, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. I have every right to do so. And if I sit here and say, hey, I, the union representative or the union organizer, have constituents that say, hey, Robert, I am being targeted. I am violated against. I have every right by the state of Colorado to stand up and say, no, enough is enough. And I have every right to blow that fucking whistle, which I will, hence the name of my TikTok page. So now continuing. So I'm protected 8-13.5-205, 8-13.5-205 protects the Agricultural Work Advisory Committee creation, report, or repeal on or after April 2022. The director of the division shall establish an Agricultural Work Advisory Committee, referred to this section as an advisory committee. The advisory committee consists of 9 members as follows. They're required. So when they sat here and denied us our rights to have a bargaining committee, to have a non-union committee of employees to discuss the practicality of unionizing without managerial interruption, they denied us our rights. 8-13.5-205 denied. And I intend to bring this up. So the director of the division shall appoint 2 members who have worked in the agricultural workers, 2 members who are advocates of agricultural rights. The commissioner of the agriculture may appoint 3 members who represent agricultural employers, 2 representatives from the Migrant Farm Workers Division of Colorado's Legal Service or its successor organization. The terms of members are 4 years. If a member fails to complete the member's term, the appointing authority shall appoint a new member to complete the remaining of that term. C, on page 16, members shall serve without compensation for their service, except that members may receive per diem as established by the executive director of the department and reimbursement for travel and any other necessary expenses incurred during their official duties. 3. The advisory committee shall gather and analyze data and other information regarding the wages and workers' conditions and agricultural workers and report its findings, any legislative recommendations to the General Assembly. So we could stand up and say, hey, the Coalition of Livable Employees is recommending this to the General Assembly. We need contracts. We need to address the discrimination from 2019 through 2023. We need to address this fair market value wage. We have people making $17 an hour, and they're like, oh, well, it's minimum wage. It's $2,000 for a single bedroom apartment in downtown Denver. So this whole, it's minimum wage crap, it's got to go. It's got to go. If I have to get a local, state, and federal background check, and I make less than McDonald's workers, that it's an 18-year-old snot, fuck you. Excuse my French, but no. And if you want to sit here and continue to say that employees that make minimum wage are upset at other employees that make minimum wage, that are wanting contracts, that are wanting these discrimination things evaluated, that are wanting our rights to be reformed, that addresses specific to cannabis farmers, and to sit here and say that we have no rights is straight up undemocratic, man. Undemocratic. So right here, to the extent possible, the executive director of the department shall ensure the advisory committee has opportunity to meet with appropriate representatives from the Department of Labor and Employment, the Department of Public Health and Environment, the Department of Agriculture, and the governor's office for purpose of conducting work pursuant to subdivision of this section. This means I can go up to the governor's office, which I did. Hence, look at this. I have his signature. I went to the governor's office. Look at that. Boom. Governor Polis on June 25th, 2021 at 11:45 a.m. Look at this. I got the president of the Senate, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Secretary of the Senate, Chief Clerk of the House of Representatives, and our Governor Polis. So I did just that. I went into that office and I declared that we needed this information. So at the end of this TikTok video, we are at the end of page 16. I'm going to be reading the last part of 16, going into pages 18, and hopefully have this summed up in the next two videos. Peace.
All right, folks, I'm live on my YouTube page, Mr. Cakes 931. I don't usually go live, but I want a full video, so now I'm on page 14, 21 pages of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, and I'm going to read this entire thing because I believe that farmers do not know their rights. Migrant workers do not know their rights. Local farmers do not know their rights. And 21-year-olds joining the cannabis industry, you do not know your rights. So this is for you guys. Check out my page if you come across this later video. This is page 14 of the Agricultural Bill of Rights of 21 pages. So alternative means performing the work that's sustainable and appropriate to both the production of agricultural or horticultural commodity and scale of operation set forth as. 3. Handheld weeding cannot be performed pursuant to
Okay. Oh, geez. These getting hundreds of views. Damn. That's cool. Someone asked for me to give a summary at the end. Someone asked me to make a full summary video. Okay. Alrighty, folks, I'm at the end of page 16. And yes, per the person that has requested me to do a full summary at the end, I will, in fact, do a full summary at the end because, damn it, this shit needs to be said. So here we are today. Here we are moving. And let's continue. So on page 16, these are the back up to page 15, Agricultural Workers Advisory Committee. And basically, this is saying that every farm has the right to 2 appointees per departmental area, 2 members of workers for agricultural workers, 2 members of advocates. The commissioner of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, whoever wrote this, is active. 3 members who represent the employer, 2 representatives from Migrant Workers Division of Colorado's Legal Services and its successor organizations. 2A, the terms of members are 4 years. If a member fails to complete member terms, the appointing authority shall appoint a new member and complete the remaining of the term, i.e. the leaders. Members shall serve without compensation for their services, except, so when they sit here and say, oh, the union leaders are making a lot of money, look at this. In writing, section C on page 16, members shall serve without compensation for their service, except that a member may receive per diem as established by the executive director of the department and reimbursement for travel and other necessary expenses incurred during the performance of their duties. As the leader of the coalition, I refuse to accept extra money, and I intended to keep my base pay equal to that of my members. But what this is saying is if I wanted to step up and say, hey, I spent $1,000 to make this happen, I could request reimbursement. But again, that is the biggest lie that they like to say, is that union organizers like myself make an arm and a leg. Bitch, when I was a union organizer, I was paycheck to paycheck. So I don't want to hear that. So continuing, excuse my French again, TikTok. Members, if a member fails to complete the member term, they shall appoint a new member. To the advisory committee shall gather and analyze data and information regarding their wages, working conditions, agricultural workers, and report its findings and legislative recommendations for the General Assembly. So what this is saying is I can recommend, which I have. I've been on personal phone calls with the agricultural advisory board. I've been on the personal phone call with the attorney of Colorado. What do they call the attorney generals? And I've been on the meetings with the Denver mayor, with the city council members, and with this going into a new election, I intend to restart those efforts. So, and also, like I said on my last video, we have the right to request all of this information, which I did, as you can see here: President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, Secretary of Senate, Chief Clerk of Representatives, and our governor. And so, with this, to the extent possible, the executive director of the department shall ensure that the advisory committee has the opportunity to meet an appropriate representative from the Department of Labor and Employment, Department of Public Health and Environment, Department of Agriculture, and the governor's office for purposes of conducting its work pursuant to the subsection of this section. So what this is saying is I have the right to go my ass down to Denver, Colorado, to the governor's office and say, listen, we need to address these reforms, which I'm half tempted to do again. So section C, notwithstanding section 24-1-136, 11AI, on or before January 2023, each January 1 thereafter, the advisory committee shall report its progress, findings, and legislative recommendations to the Agricultural, Livestock, and Water Committee, Business Affairs and Labor Committee, House of Representatives, and their successor committees, Agricultural and National Resources Committee, and the Bureau of Labor Technology Committee of Senate and the successor. So this has only been in action 11 months. 11 months. And I have already watched entire departments get fired. I've watched key leaders of associations get fired, dispensary leaders canned. I have watched it time and time again, including myself on January 6th, 5 days after this being enacted. So I'm sitting here. I intend on speaking with our governor and our state leadership about reforms that need to be made, because it's only a $50 fine if the employer is caught guilty for doing this. And so ultimately, or a $10,000 fine if they are found guilty as a whole. And so ultimately, we need reform. We need reform. We need reform. Page 16 needs to be reformed. So continuing, page 17, an agricultural national resource or communities. This section is repealed. Effective September 1st, 2031, be thereby repealed. The advisory committee is scheduled for review in accordance to this section 2-3-1203. So this is coming in 2031. So that's 8 years from now. That is 8 years from now. Section 6 in Colorado's revised statutes adds as follows: sunset review advisory committees, legislative declaration, Definitions of repeal. The following statutory authorizations for this designed as advisory committee will be repealed on September 1st, 2031. The Agricultural Work Advisory Committee created Section 8-13. The subsection 22 is repealed effective September 1st, 2033. These are laws. In Colorado Revised Statutes amending Section 1, 3C, and 3D, and adding 1.5 and 3.e as follows. Definitions are used in this Article 14.4 unless the context is otherwise required. And they scratched this part out. Department means the Department of Labor and Employment, and corrected it to agricultural employment has the meaning set forth in sections 8-13.5-201, section 2. Department means the Department of Labor and Employment. Principal means the state of Colorado, local governments, and political subsidiaries, and state defined under sections 1.7-1-7.5-101-1036. An entity that contracts within five or more independent contractors in a state each year, a person or entity engaged in agricultural employment. The Colorado Revised Statutes adds 8-14.4.109 as the follows. Agricultural employees' responsibilities during a public health emergency, i.e. COVID, when they were firing everybody left and right because they could. Here's an obligation during a public health emergency. Worker safety protections. During a public safety emergency, in addition to other protections and rights as workers, a principal engaged in agricultural employment shall provide each worker with living and an employer-provided housing with a single occupancy unit where the worker is housed alone, at least 8 square feet combined sleeping and living quarters. In a multiple occupancy housing, at least 100 square feet or multiple square quarters for workers and 120 square feet per worker assigned to the areas for combined purpose of meal preparation and eating. Basically, what was happening, these migrant workers during the pandemic were getting sick and dying because these employers wouldn't do shit. And you know what? It was insulting and degrading. All housing screened windows that open to the outside living space must have an air filtration system, providing each worker actively engaged in an open range production of livestock with a single occupancy mobile housing unit, regardless of any variances otherwise available pursuant to 220 CFR 655.235. Basically, if you were a migrant worker during a public health emergency, which we are still in, COVID is still here, you are obligated to safe housing. Now, C, allow the Department of Public Health and Environment to routinely inspect employer-provided housing to ensure compliance with guidelines issued by the Department of Public Health and Environment applicable to the public health emergency or any other applicable executive orders issued by a governor during a disaster emergency declared pursuant to this section. What this is saying is you migrant workers, man, y'all were brutalized, scrutinized, and put in such shit conditions during the pandemic, man. And still required to go to work. And in our position on farmers, if you got sick with COVID and you reported it, you were getting fired. And guess what? If you didn't report it and you came to work because you felt otherwise, guess what? You are getting fired. And then on top of it, they were sitting here putting people in positions of straight derogatory manner, meaning if say you knew someone else was sick, you were supposed to report it to your employer so that they can send them home or X, Y, or Z, straight discriminatory. Because if I have a broken nose and I always have a nose sniffle, which I do, I have a broken nose, my right nose is always draining. I always look, shit's acting this way right now. I look sick half the fucking time. And so all it takes is one person to go over to my employer and be like, hey, he's sick. And guess what? I lose my job. You can't do that. You can't do that. They did it very much so. And you know what? Here's in writing that you cannot do that. And it was the pandemic that unfortunately made that happen. So that is the ending of page 19. Ending at page 19. We are now an hour into my live stream on Mr. Cakes 931 on YouTube. And with that, there's still parts that bleed into page 19. There's 21 pages, so I have 2 more pages to read.
Alrighty, folks, I'm at the end of page 16. And yes, for the person that has requested me to do a full summary at the end, I will, in fact, do a full summary at the end because, damn it, this shit needs to be said. So here we are today. Here we are moving. And Glad to see it. So on page 16, these are the page 15, Agricultural Workers Advisory Committee. Basically, this is saying that every farm has the right to two appointees per departmental area, two members of workers for agricultural workers, two members of advocates, the commissioner, the agricultural Bill of Rights, whoever wrote it.
Okay. All right. We are nearing that point. I'm on page 19 of 21 pages of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. I am reading these from my fellow colleagues. I am standing up for my farm workers. I am a third generation farmer. My greatest grandparents farmed during the world wars, and they taught me a lot. And you know what? My pops taught me a lot, and my mother taught me so much, and stood up and was like, you know what? You need to learn your rights, because as a German man from Middle Tennessee, the amount of mismanagement of farms is very real. And to see that Colorado stood up, and our governor and our state representatives, both Democratic and Republican, and our state senators, both Democratic and Republican, and our state House of Representatives stood up and said, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Hello. And so what I'm getting at is on page 19, going into page 20, they're addressing migrant workers. And I'm also on TikTok as well. I'm addressing some issues that I'm seeing, and I'm excited that we need reforms. And I intend to stand up and speak to our attorney general. I intend to stand up and whistle blow to our state representatives. And I intend to stand up and be like, enough is enough. And farmers everywhere across the state of Colorado have been discriminated enough against, have been scrutinized enough against, that enough is enough. So without further ado, page 19 is the ending. What are unfair labor practices? So page 19, what are unfair labor practices? And we have 2 more pages left on 21-33.5-704 Colorado statute, providing training to workers concerning safety precaution and protections during a public health emergency, providing informational and educational materials throughout posters and pamphlets written in English and Spanish and in other relevant languages like German, for instance, and any employer providing housing, worker sites, and other places principal usually post information for workers of that. What was happening is there was a Jim Crow law against Spanish workers, against Asian workers, and not my farm in particular. I watched there's not a single Spanish speaking poster anywhere. And my fellow colleagues, as the leader, were like, Robert, we want Spanish speaking posters. So if we get hurt, if something's going on, we need access to it. So now this is in writing, section E, required by state law that an agricultural employer is required to post this in all languages available. And if there is even just one additional language, like German, for instance, a German speaking employee, they are required to have it in German as well. So section I, list the contact information for migrant farm workers, divisions of Colorado Legal Services, and its successor organizations. A worker may receive free and confidential legal services. What that means, if you are a farmer specific to a migrant worker, you now have free free legal services provided by the state of Colorado. Page 19 is very thick, so we might sit on this page for a second. List of contact information. Inform the workers regarding federal and state guidance concerning a public health emergencies. Section 9, and this is an addition, this is a big one. Section 9 in the state Colorado revised statutes, numbers 8 through 3 through 108, amending 1C II A and 1C II B as follows, and this is an important one. In Colorado, what are unfair labor practices? It is unfair labor practice for any employer, individual, or concert with others. 2. Section C II and any agreement is defined to sections 8-3, 104, 1.5 between an employer and labor organization in existence on June 29th, 1977, which has not been voted on by the employees covered by it may, by written mutual agreement of such employer or labor organization, be ratified, and upon such ratification be filled by the director. Any agreement as defined 8-3, 104 between an employer and labor organization in existence of June 29, 1977, with which has not been ratified or filed, provided subsections 1C II shall not be legal, valid, or enforceable remaining term of the labor contract unless it is until the employer, the labor organization, or at least 20% of the employees covered by such agreement file petition upon forming that decision, demanding an election submitting the question of an all-union agreement to employees covered under such agreement and said agreement approved by. What this is saying is there was a law that was just abolished by Jared Polis in the state of Colorado. In the state of Colorado, there was a law from 1977, a Jim Crow era law that was designed to target Asian workers and Mexican workers and give white workers a up above everybody. Those were completely abolished on January 1st, 2022. And ultimately, this right here, Agreement CIIA under Colorado Constitution 8-3 through 108, what are unfair labor practices? And it is official that it is unfair for any farm employee to be scrutinized against for forming a union. And then on top of it, not just a union, a committee of employees, non-unionized, on top of a committee of wage asserting employees, meaning that they want to review their wages. And so and again, I said I'm on TikTok as well. For my Mexican colleagues here, my Spanish speaking colleagues, my Asian American colleagues, and from where I'm from, my German colleagues, you have the right to step up and demand assertive action under penalty of the state of Colorado's laws. And this was enacted on January 1st, 2022, put into stone January 1st, 2023, about to be reformed on January 1st, 2024. And it is up to us, the farmers, under these statutes to demand of our constituents, our House of Reps, our Congress, to reform these values. And one of the biggest things that we mentioned was Spanish-speaking Americans are so heavily scrutinized against, it is degrading. It is degrading, man. And there's no reason why my employer, my former employer, looked at me, a person, even though I have three generations of farming experience. I had a Mexican friend that had a master's degree in agriculture and horticulture, making $3 less than I did because he spoke Spanish. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. I will gladly cut my wage in half to ensure that our wages are equal. And so with this now, under Section 2 CIIA on page 19, I have the right as a farmer to stand up for my farmers. And under page 17 and 16, I have the right as a whistleblower to stand up and say enough is enough. And yes, in the comments, yes, absolutely. If you are a migrant worker, you do not, I'm getting angry here. My glasses are coming off. I'm getting angry. You cannot be scrutinized against because of your ethnicity, your language denomination, or where you're from. You can't do that. So continuing on page 20, this is the continuation of unfair labor practices. The affirmative vote of at least a majority of employees eligible to vote to 3/4 or more of the employees who actually voted, whichever is greater. A secret ballot in favor of such all union agreement, or an election provided for subsections 1C conducted under supervision of the director. So what this is saying, is that before you used to have everyone to sign on. Now you only need 20% to sign on, and then on top of it, to actually form a full favor, you only need you need 3/4 or more of the total to actually vote. You don't need all 100% to vote. That's bullshit. They sat there and they will strategically place people in positions to stop these farmers from organizing. So continuing, upon filing of such instrument of ratification with this director, the Director of Agriculture shall certify that such agreement complies with the provisions of sections 8-3-104. Notwithstanding in the absence of any other election requirements, Article 3, by the virtue of the ratification certification, such agreement shall be deemed legal, valid, and enforceable, extent permitted under the provisions. Article 3, subject of provisions, subsections 1C, 11D. And I'm going to stop right there and get this posted. But guess what, guys? You have the right, with 20% of your colleagues, to stand up and say, we demand a union. And guess what? The state of Colorado will recognize your union and then push to allow you guys to vote. So I'm on page 20 of 21 pages of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. I've spent a little bit of time on page 19 on this one. Guys, girls, farmers, it's time we stand up and demand reform. Peace. Okay, YouTube. So I just posted the page 17 through 20. I'm about to begin my last posting on pages 20 and 21. And then I'm going to be doing a full summary of all of them. And I'm going to go page by page, and I'm going to summarize page by page. Page 1 is this, page 2 is this, page 3 is this, page 4 is that, page, etc. So I'm about to do the summary, and I'm so excited about it. And you know what? Folks need to know. Folks need to know. And as a farmer, I believe folks deserve to know, and most people don't know. So I'm here to say time is now, and I think it's time. So without further ado, let me get this posted, and I will begin reading pages 20 and 21.
Amount of mismanagement of farms is very real, and to see that Colorado stood up, and our governor and our state representative, both Democratic and Republican, our state senator, both Democratic and Republican, and our state House of Representatives stood up and said, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Hello. And so what I'm getting at is on page 19, going into page 20, they're addressing migrant workers. And I'm also on TikTok as well. I'm addressing some issues that I'm seeing, and I'm excited that we need reforms. And I intend to stand up and speak to our Attorney General. I intend to stand up and whistle blow to our state representatives. And I intend to stand up and be like, enough is enough. And farmers everywhere across the state of Colorado have been discriminated enough against, have been scrutinized enough against, that enough is enough. So without further ado, page 19 is the ending of what are unfair labor practices. So page 19, what are unfair labor practices? And we have 2 more pages left. On 21-33.5-704 Colorado statute, providing training to workers concerning safety.
Okay, now that's posting. Let's see how that is doing. It looks like I'm probably going to get dinged for posting too many things back to back to back.
Alrighty.
but that's okay. I'm almost done. So,
Alrighty.
all right, my TikTok friends, thanks for sticking with me. I am finishing up on page 19 and 20. I just read what is an unfair labor practice, so I'm going to reread that at the beginning of this post. So, without further ado, ending of page 19, Agricultural Bill of Rights. What is an unfair labor practice? It is an unfair labor practice for an employer, individual, or in concert with others to, as follows. Section A. Any agreement as defined in Section 8-3104, 1.5 between an employer or labor organization in existence on June 29, 1977, which has not been voted upon by the employees conferred. It may be written mutual agreement of such employer or labor organization be ratified, and upon ratification but shall be filed with the director. Any agreement defined as 8-3-104 between an employer and labor organization in existence on June 29, 1977, which has not been ratified or filed as provided subsection shall not be legal, valid, or enforceable during the remaining term of that labor contracts until either by the employer, the labor organization, or at least 20% of the employees covered by such agreement filed petition upon forms provided by the division demanding an election submitting the question of an all-union agreement by the employees covered by such agreement and said agreement approved by the affirmative vote of at least a majority or all of the employees eligible to vote or 3/4 or more of the employees who actually voted, whichever is greater, by secret ballot in favor of such all-union agreement in an election provided for subsections 1C conducted under the supervisions of the director. B. Upon filing of such and this is page 20 now. Upon filing of such instrument of ratification with the director shall certify that the agreement complies with the provisions of sections 8-3-104, 1.5, notwithstanding the absence of any other election requirements, Article 3, by the virtue of such ratification certification, such agreement shall be deemed legal, valid, and enforceable by the extended period of time under the provisions of Article 3, subject to the provisions of subsections 1C, II, in this section. Section 10 on page 20. The Colorado Revised Statute amends 8-13.5-101 as follows. 8-13.5-101 short title. The short title of this Part 1 is the Workplace Accommodation for Nursing Mothers Act. In Colorado Revised Statutes amended as follows. Legislative Declaration. The General Assembly further declares the purpose of this article of this Part 1 for the state of Colorado to become involved in a national movement to recognize the medical importance of breastfeeding, with the scope complete to pediatric care, and encourage removal of boundaries placed on nursing mothers in the workplace. Colorado Revised Statutes amends the introduction proportion as follows. Definitions used in the article unless otherwise requires. The Colorado Revised Statutes amends 44-10-105 as follows. This is the wordy page. This is the last page of the Agricultural Bill of Rights specific to mothers. And believe it or not, there are a lot of mothers out here in the industry that experience levels of discrimination because this isn't a man's world. This isn't a man's world. I'll say that again. This is not a man's world. And for us to think that it is, y'all can get fucked. You know, it's just not. It's not cool, bro. It's not cool at all. This is not a man's world. So, marijuana employee designation. So this was not in the Agricultural Bill of Rights. We had a very long conversation with the writer of the Agricultural Bill of Rights, Senator Jesse Danielson, and we implored to her that marijuana workers needed to be specifically outlined inside of this topic. So page 20, it also includes marijuana workers. So, and that's what I am. I am a cannabis employee, former cannabis employee of Colorado. I can't seem to find employment out here anymore because of my associations to the unionizing coalition of Live Well employees. But basically, 44-10-105 in bold as follows. Marijuana employees designation. An employee of a license is not an agricultural worker unless is a laborer at a farm plantation, ranch, nursery, range, greenhouse, orchard, or any other structure used for the agricultural horticulture commodities, as long as the structure is utilized for at least 50% of the total output produced. So in our case, the headquarters, when they said, oh, you guys aren't agricultural workers, no, we were farmers, bro. Farmers. Section 14, appropriation for 2021 and 2022, the state fiscal year, $474,000 is appropriated to the Department of Labor and Employment. This appropriation is for the Employment Support Fund created in Sections 8-77. In intent, this act is department may use the appropriation as follows. $436,000 for the state Colorado for use by the Division of Labor and Standards for specific programs related to labor standards, which is based on the assumption that the division will acquire an additional 5.2. I don't know what FTE stands for. B, $38,000 for the purpose of legal services. And if you check out one of my earlier videos, I made a video about the implications of the money for the SB rights, and that's kind of what this is going into. And the employers had the audacity to say that it's going to cost the state taxpayers millions upon millions of dollars. No, it's $38,000 for legal services. So from 2021 to 2022, $38,000 was appropriated to the Department of Law. This appropriation was reappropriated funds received from the Department of Labor, and a subsequent of 1B of the section is based on the assumption that the Department of Law will require additional 0.02 and implement the act that Department of Law may use this appropriation for provide legal services for the Department of Labor and its employment. For 2021-2020 the state fiscal year, $193,800 was appropriated to the Department of Agriculture. This appropriation was from the general fund and based on the assumption that the department will require an additional 0.9 FTE. Someone can explain what FTE stands for, because I don't. To implement this act, the department may use appropriation for the plant industry division. What this means is when they said, oh, it's going to cost millions of dollars to regulate this for agricultural employees, it actually was only 400, 500, 600, actually roughly $700,000. We spend that on junk. So Section 15, which last page, the Agricultural Bill of Rights, the General Assembly hereby finds Senate Bill 21-087 a law. So determines and declares that this act is necessary and immediate for the preservation of public peace, health, and safety. So again, we are now at the end of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. It took me 1 hour and 22 minutes to read. So it was quite the read. I did it in segments of 10 minutes on TikTok. And again, I have an original copy. I'm reading an original copy and referring to the modernized copy. This is an original copy here, signed in 2021 by Jared Polis himself. Also signed in 2021 by several key influencers, and personally hand-delivered to me by Senator Jesse Danielson, the first writer and organizer of the Agricultural Bill of Rights. So with this, y'all, I'm about to make a video of my summary of what I think had occurred here. And this is my YouTube Live. Just ignore it. I'm using that as a big video for later that I can reference. But each of this includes the original version. And I went through and I was cross-referencing them to the section titles and what they mean, who they mean, what's going on with them, what it does for you, what it does for the employee, what it does for the employer, what it does for the unionizing employees, and ultimately the public has no idea what these farmers are going to. It's so bad that our state had to develop an agricultural bill of rights specific for farmers. And if you think it's bullshit, you need to look it up. SB21-087 was made in 2022, January 1st, 2022, shortly after this, and was enacted and is about to be reformed again January 1st, 2024. It was fully enacted on January 1st, 2023. I lost my job January 6th, 2023, And several of my colleagues, including department leaders, also lost their jobs by February of 2023. So the Agricultural Bill of Rights needs stronger wording, it needs to be reformed, and ultimately, farmers, I'm here to help you guys get educated. Peace. Okay, YouTube, a little end of deal exclusive. I'm about to do a summary of why I decided that this needs to be read, and I am going to post this entire thing. I don't care if there's only 1 viewer, 2 viewers, or 100 million viewers. Folks need to understand that farmers are fed up. Farmers are fed up, and it's not fair what these farmers are going through. It's not fair that these farmers have to stand up and feel that they are second-class citizens when they are primary providers for across-the-board commodities. And it's not fair that an employee has to go through this amount of levels of discrimination and stand up and say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. And so I'm using my voice, my platforms, my 500 subscribers to spread the word on what is occurring, to spread the word on what's going on. And you know what, guys? And I know there's only going to be about like maybe 1,000 people to see my views on TikTok. I'm angry. I'm upset. And I am astonished that our industry is in this position right now. I am astonished. It is not okay. It is not okay. And I'm here to say today, as a farmer, I am upset with how they are treating these employees. I am upset with what's going on, and I am upset that nothing is being done about it. And I am upset that 22 pages of laws and regulations were being completely disavowed, completely going against everything that farmers stood up to say. Enough was enough. Enough was enough. Completely slap into the faces the senators Danielson, Marino, Fields, Peterson, Bridges, Buckner, Coleman, Finberg, Gonzalez, Hansen, Jaquez, Lewis, Colker, Rodriguez, Story, Winter, Garcia, Representatives McCormick, Carvana, Durango, Duran, Kennedy, Serrata, Woodrow, Young, Mabel, Bacon, Burnett, Bird, Bosnecker, Cutler, Daughtry, Exum, Froelich, Gray, Herod, Houghton, Jackson, Joda, Kip, Lontine, McCluskey, Michelson, Janet, Malika, and Valdez A's, representatives, congressmen, and leaders. We need help. We need help. So now I'm going to post this. I'm going to take a moment, and then I'm going to have my summary of all of this. I'm going to see if I can do it in one video, and then I'm going to tie it all down. And the reason why I did this long YouTube video is because I felt that I can come back and reference this one day, or someone can say, you know what, Robert had a fucking point. Robert had enough, and he was tired of watching his Hispanic friends get discriminated against. I'm tired of seeing my homosexual friends get discriminated against. I'm tired of being grouped into a white racist ass bracket because I'm a redneck from the South. I'm tired of it. I believe everyone is equal. I believe everyone is on the same level, and I believe everyone has the right to express themselves wholesomely. And so, as a whistleblower, I experienced in 2022, a full-fledged anti-union sentiment. And I watched going into 2023 after I was fired, them target key employees and key people across the board, and it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay. So minus my YouTube exclusive, here we are, we're going into 2024, and this is still occurring. This is still occurring. And my question is why? My question is why is this still occurring? So we get this posted, and then I can continue.
Thanks for sticking with me. I am finishing up on page 19 and 20. I just read what is an unfair labor practice, and I'm going to reread that at the beginning of this post. So without further ado, ending of page 19, Agricultural Bill of Rights. What is an unfair labor practice? It is an unfair labor practice for an employer, individual, or in concert with others to, as follows. Section A. Any agreement as defined in Section 8-3104 1.5 between an employer or labor organization in existence on June 29, 1977, which has not been voted upon by the employees concurred. Alrighty, folks. What is up, friends? So check it out. So what is up, my friends? So I went ahead and put some old documents out of a folder. So I, back in the day, printed out some.
Okay. What's up, Talk? Okay, so I have been reading the Colorado Agricultural Bill of Rights. I have the original copy that I got from the court downtown in Denver, signed by the President of Senate, Speaker of House, Secretary of Senate, Chief of Clerk, and the Governor in 2021 before its enacting in 2022, January 1, and then its enforcement in January 1, 2023. I was a union leader from 2022 into 2023. I was fired 5 days after the enaction of the Agricultural Bill of Rights that was designed to protect me. We took them into court and we won a settlement of $5,000 each for the union leaders that were affected. But I still feel that wasn't enough. There wasn't enough happening. Those still same people in charge are now even further in charge. The director that was responsible for all of our union busting is about to be promoted to the state director of Pennsylvania. The director in charge of the 3 facilities who was ultimately responsible for the major union busting is still in charge. And the HR that was there for the union busting, she quit 2 weeks after we were declared busted. How convenient is that? And ultimately, they have spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars at this point, stopping my colleagues from having contracts of employment to enforce their legitimacy, stopping my colleagues from standing up and saying, we want wages above $25 an hour for a commodity that has made this state billions. And we want recognition for our legitimacy for the fact that we have to have state, local, and federal background checks. And we wanted to address the systemic discrimination across the board on farms, on trim rooms, in curing cycles, and in dispensaries. And ultimately, we were shot down for that. And guess what? I am still standing up strong as hell and empowered to sit here and continue to poke the bear on our entire industry. So without further ado, page 1, this was enacted by Senator Danielson. I had a personal conversation with her, and she has taken personal light of what's going on. And they talked about what is an agricultural bill of rights, what is an agricultural employee, what is an agricultural employer. And it goes into the rights and remedies of this bill and what this an agricultural bill employer shall not retaliate against any person. And then basically continuing page 3, the Agricultural Bill of Rights, persons of a family. They went into the pursuant the rules adopted and the things that they're wanting to change. They went into what happens if you are in fact retaliated against any person who has a family member in the workplace, etc. Page 4 goes into the all union agreement that was scratched out. Agriculture employer means a person that, and they completely scratched out all of that. The person that regularly engages in services of one or more employees that contracts any person or recruits. And then it went on to the meaning of an agricultural employer, and then it goes into our union agreements, and then it went into on page 5 who is hired and what an employee means. An employee is any person that, and you can see where they got rid of the independent contractors, etc. And then it went into labor disputes, and then it showed employment information, stuff that's going on. So there's just a lot of stuff happening inside of this thing. So then it goes into what the employer includes, etc. And then big items here that are changing. Things in bold: minimum wage workers, meaning the migrant workers that were getting paid a slave value because they were quote unquote living there, that got paid $100 a week to run these farms. Guess what? Now they have to make a minimum of $550
and still provide their housing. So minimum wage set forth thereon. And then this part right here, the duty-free meal periods, break times, you're obligated to a 10-minute period. If you are a defoliator like GP2, for instance, at LiveWell headquarters, you are obligated to 15 minutes uninterrupted. What that means is you have 15 wholesome minutes for you to be able to go and stop and do what you're doing. Not meaning you have 10 minutes and 5 minutes to walk back. No, you have 15 minutes in writing to do what you need to do and then return to your workspace. And they cannot penalize you for that, as they tend to try to. And then it goes into agricultural workers representatives, the type of employment, occasional intermittent key service providers. What this means, if you're living on the location, your employer is required to allow you to go and get key services, because if you're a Monday through Friday 40-hour worker, banks close by 4 o'clock. Medical professionals are always closed. You can't go and get your medicine. And so this is saying you are allowed to go and do that without penalty. And a legal advocate and government officials are there with you, ready to pounce on that bullshit. And so continuing, the agriculture and workers shall have meaningful access to services, including key service providers, including work during working hours, non-excessive of 40 hours per week, may have difficulty accessing type services. So this goes into what you are allowed to obtain as a worker. So if you're sick and you say, I need to go to a doctor, and then they penalize you for it, that's not allowed. They cannot give you points for that shit. That is not allowed. And then continuing, agricultural worker has access to being able to. So if you live on that farm, but you do not have transportation, your employer is obligated to give you that transportation. Now, if you have your transportation and you work and live on that farm, you are allowed to stop what you're doing during your workday and go to your medical provider. And then you have your extreme working conditions like heat stress. They are required anything excessive of 80 degrees. Excessive of 80 degrees or higher. What that means is if it's above 80 degrees, they are required to allow you to stop what you are doing, drink water, take a break, get some fresh air. And then going into short-handled hose, like, weeding, that shit got outlawed. The amount of people that have back problems now because of that stuff. And then hand thinning of high-density plants. This is for you cannabis workers. This is you cannabis workers. There's ones that are defoliating all fucking day. You, my friends, are obligated to 15 minutes of time per couple of hours just to stop and be able to take care of yourselves. And it goes into the different types of weeding and what it goes on to, what's going on with that, and how they intend to address it. And then it kind of keeps going into the hand weeding and stuff. Penalties set thereon. So these are penalties that if aggrieved agricultural workers, whistleblowers, or key service providers who are unable to access agricultural workers due to a violation of this part, we could sit here and take them to district court. We can assert claims without recommendations. Continuing on the claims, and then the court may, and here's what the courts can do. So this is page 15 on what the courts can do. And continuing on page 15, the Agricultural Employee Committee. You're allowed to have a committee of employees, and then you are allowed to dictate what they earn in their terms. Ours, we didn't want any compensation. We just wanted contracts of employment. And with this says that the employer is only allowed to have 3 members who represent the agricultural employer. Know your rights, guys. Know your rights, guys. And so continuing here, we have the stuff that's being repealed, stuff that's getting revised. And then you have your agricultural employers' responsibilities during pandemics, such as like or health emergencies, such as like COVID and stuff, when all those people are getting fired. And then the housing of which the employee is required to have during those times. And then like this one has not been voted on, mutual agreements of employers and labor organization ratifications. These are unfair labor practices. Feel free to pause. These are unfair labor practices and their penalties. Again, more unfair labor practices and their penalties, and the filing ratifications that's coming up, statutes that are being amended, things that are going on. And so going into the last page, this is the appropriation of, and I did a full video of this information right here when they sat here and told us that it's going to cost us millions of dollars to enact this Bill of Rights. This is barely, $800,000 right here, and this shows exactly where it's going and exactly what's going on. And again, President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, Secretary of Senate, Chief Clerk of Representatives. I had this signed and approved at 11:45 a.m. by Jared Polis himself. I ain't fucking around. So with this last minute of this summary, what I got to say is, as a cannabis employee, farms across Colorado are being discriminated against. These employers are out of touch, they are out of control, and they need to be addressed. They need to be publicly scrutinized. Consumers, you need to understand what you are consuming. You are smoking pot that is not healthy for you. Pot has never been healthy, but we used to worry about cartels, but now we have every tool and resource imaginable for a good product, and we are refusing to produce a favorable product to the market. And they're so busy to say, oh, the market is crashing. That is bullshit. That is bullshit. That is bullshit. So I'm here to tell you guys, Agricultural Bill of Rights, 21 pages. Pretty sure TikTok's going to mark me as spam, but farmers, you need to know your rights. And you know what? Ask me questions. Ask me all the questions. I will post it and continue to post it. I love you guys. Peace. Thanks for hearing me out on this read.
What's up, TikTok? Okay, so I have been reading Colorado Agricultural Bill of Rights. I have the original copy that I got from the court downtown in Denver, signed by the President of Senate, Speaker of House, Secretary of Senate, Chief of Clerk, and Governor in 2021 before its enactment in 2022, January 1, and its enforcement in January 1, 2023. I was a union leader from 2022 into 2023. I was fired 5 days after the enactment of the Agricultural Bill of Rights that was designed to protect me. We took them into court, and we won a settlement of $5,000 each for the union leaders that were affected. But I still feel that wasn't enough. There wasn't enough happening. Those still same people in charge are now even further in charge. The director that was responsible for all of our union busting is about to be promoted to the state director in Pennsylvania. The director in charge of the 3 facilities who is ultimately responsible.
Okay, YouTube. Y'all have heard my perspective. An hour 45. Doubt anyone's going to see all of this. But you know what? Whoever does, SB21-087 needs to be reformed. It needs to be reformed. We have people that are discriminated against, people that are being scrutinized, farms that are completely disemboweling themselves, and it's not okay. The Colorado cannabis market is on a verge, and it's not from sales. It is from lack of representation in our market. It's from lack of being vocalized on what's going on. And farmers, I encourage, stand up and know your rights. Stand up and enforce your new rights. Stand up and enforce this Agricultural Bill of Rights, because it has only been acted for 11 months and has been completely sidewalled by all of these major conglomerates, and it is not okay. So at the ending of this video, I just posted on my TikTok, Blowing the Whistle 420. Thank you for everyone that watched my live stream. I've never done a live stream before, and ultimately, this was not okay. It was not okay. The Agricultural Bill of Rights is put in place for us for protections, and I was fired 5 days after it was enacted. And then I continued to watch my friends, my colleagues fired, on and so forth. And so here we are today, 1 month to seeing the new Agricultural Bill of Rights. And I am ashamed of our market. I am ashamed. The fact that we even had to stand up and put it in our Constitution is wrong. But you know what? It is right for us to stand up and demand action. So my name is Robert. Folks know me as Mr. Cakes 931. I am an advocate for cannabis employees. I am an advocate for equality in farms, and I am an advocate for farmers everywhere in our country. Farmers across the country. Colorado's Agricultural Bill of Rights is here, and it's not going anywhere. It's only going to be more enforced, more emphasized, and we want everyone to have a contract of employment. We want everyone to feel confident when they go to work that they're not going to be discriminated against. And we want everyone to know that they have a place in this market. So much appreciated. Y'all take it easy. Peace.